Okay, so Sukin, you have written, you were writing books of different genre while you were an associate professor of English at UKM. What prompted you to embark on this trilogy of Peranakan books, which are now bestsellers? And how did you even come up with the idea of writing short stories? Congratulations, a novel to be published next year. Now she's got a novel coming. What inspires you and what challenges do you encounter when writing fiction based on the Peranakans? Would you consider writing stories based on Peranakan history in the face of so much distortion and commodification of our heritage culture?
Thank you. Thank you, Lily. The first question, you're writing books of different genres. What prompted you to embark on this trilogy? So it started, as you know.
Can you hear?
Can you move this to the side? I want to look like a triangle. Sorry. As you know, in academia, academic writing is very dry, very cut and dry, right? No generalizations, suppositions have to be backed up by very detailed examples. It's very rigid, very constrained. You have the citations, paraphrasing, everything's got to be very, very orderly, very, very intellectual, very constrained. And I always had this creative part of me that sort of rankled at academic writing. In academia, you've got to publish and publish. So I have done my share of publishing book chapters and journal articles, but there was always this creative side of me. And I remember even as a child, I told my mother I wanted to be a writer. And of course, Malaysian parents, Chinese as yourself, you cannot survive academic writing. You cannot survive being a writer. Academic writing you can as a lecturer. So you can't start an academic treatise as if it was a dark and sloppy night. Suddenly a screen appears the air, right? So the creative part of me found its outlet by doing, apart from academic writing, creative writing as well. So I started writing fiction. I like to employ a lot of humor, pathos, satire, and I wrote a column for The Star called Malaysian Flavors. Then that led on to 3 books, non-fiction, Malaysian Flavors, Insights into Things Malaysian, which focuses on the idiosyncrasies of Malaysians. You may think you know, but we have a lot of idiosyncrasies. For example, if someone says, "Oh, Julie is so pretty today, her hair is so nice," like old hair. This is a pasta malam, We never accept a compliment graciously. And I remember a foreigner asking me, "Sukim, why is the Malaysians can't just say thank you when they compliment them? Why do they always say, no, I'm very old?" So things like that, idiosyncrasies. Then it led on to Manglish, which became a bestseller, and it's going to be published again, co-authored with Stephen Hall. Another edition is coming out next year. Manglish, Malaysian English. Also hilarious, full of wonderful idiosyncrasies as well. And after that, I wrote Nyonya in Texas. So 3 non-fiction. Then I thought, why not try fiction? So in 2008, I started writing fiction, short stories, because I had so many stories in my head, and my mother was also a wonderful storyteller. And I started writing a book called Kebaya Tales. Lots of wonderful stories. And I also had this concept in mind that when I write this short story, I'm going to put it into a book, and between each short story, I'm going to have a picture of a kebaya. Because I was going to write stories about the community that wears kebaya, the Nyonyas and the Babas. I think many of you know that in the past, kebayas were actually commissioned, right? For example, you could go to a kebaya maker and say, I want a kebaya full of peonies and lotuses. Or if you like cooking, I want a kebaya with fishes and goldfishes and chickens. So I had this idea that between each short story, I have a montage of a kebaya with a motive that matched the short story. And eventually, I think in 2011, Kebaya Tales was published. It's only book that's named after the textile Kebaya Tales. And because of the themes that emerged in the book, was called of matriarchs, maidens, mistresses, and matchmakers. And eventually, I was surprised. I was worried. Like, who's going to read stories? Who's going to be interested in stories of our grandmothers and mothers in the Nyonyas? But I was surprised, pleasantly surprised, that it sold out within 3 months and became a bestseller. And it's gone on to become, I think it's more than 10,000 copies. So that was Kabaya Tales. And when you have a kabaya, you have to have a sarong. So the next book that came along was Sarong Secrets of Love, Loss and Longing. And recently it's also become a bestseller. And then I thought, okay, that's it. Kabaya Tales, 2011, Sarong Secrets, 2013. But along came the editor, Violet who said, Suki, you have got to write another one. You've got to write another book to make it a trilogy. And she even showed me the cover of the book that she planned for the third book. So I decided to call it again, because playing the theme of kabaya, sarong, something to do with the attire of the Nyonyas. So what was it going to be? What can I call this next book? Is it going to be like croissant knockers? What? So then decided, why not the shoes, the intricate shoes of the Nyonyas, not so well known, Manek mischiefs. And this time we focus on the stories of the Babas. So it's called Playboys, Patriarchs, and Babas, and Paramours. Right? So that's the trilogy. The second question was, how did you even come up with the idea of writing short stories? Well, first of all, so many interesting characters in the Baba Nyonya community, and I'm sure as well with so many other communities in Malaysia, very colorful, flamboyant characters. For example, I have an uncle. Well, first of all, I'm a 6th generation Nyonya with links to the Penang and the Malaccan side. Paternal side is Penang, so I'm linked to the Penang Peranakan's, and paternal side is Malaccan. So I'm familiar with Hokkien as well as Baba Malay, and I can speak Hokkien, and I speak with Baba Malay as well. So over in Penang, I had an uncle called Bluebeard, who when he died, 7 mistresses turned up, all concubines of the little children in tow. And then you had this auntie who was very, very fierce called Nyati, who when I visited her was always If you expect a place on top, and then you had at the gate of her house, she had beware of dogs. So I was wondering, why is she beware of dogs? She's got 2 sons called Or Cow and Pet Cow, which means black dog and white dog. In those days, you like to give the children very ugly names so that the dogs will not be jealous. And my own grandmother, my maternal grandmother, when she gave birth to her firstborn child, the baby was very, very ill. And this was 1990, like so back in actually. So when she gave birth to the firstborn child, this baby was so ill, she had to give her child away. Right? So this kind of very complicated stories. So when this child eventually grew up, she came back to visit my mother in my house. And she would go on saying, she was always very resentful, seething resentment that she was given away. Right? Then over in Malacca, again, very interesting flamboyant characters. Can you imagine, I've got relatives like in Malacca, all Kukong Cowboy. Si Bongo, which means Mr. Crooked. Si Botak, which means Boleh. And this is my favorite, Si Pantat Panjang, which means Chong Sifat, which means long-winded bloody food. It means when it comes to visit you, he's so long-winded, he'll just sit there and talk and never go home. So his nickname was Si Pantat Panjang, which means long backside. And then of course I've got this relative called Bibik Buah Kelak. So I'm sure you know what it means, right? Probably very, very good in the cooking. Buah Kelak. So wonderful stories full of intrigue, scandals. I had an uncle who was in a property quarrel with his brother, and one day he went home and under the mango tree he just fell dead. He just dropped dead. And the wife, the widow, showed us that you see Chelaka, his relatives, they must have poke out him because the doctor's report showed that he had lots and lots of needles inside his body. So there are supernatural stories as well, right? And of course, there's this wonderful stories of World War II, which my mother told me. For example, the day that her Japanese boss came home in August 1945, came home. She was at the office, and the Japanese boss started blubbering and crying. And then my mother asked him, what's wrong? All he could say was, Hiroshima, Hiroshima, Hiroshima. Stories like that. So very interesting characters, quarrels, scandals, intrigues, and so on. As well as the whole eclectic mix of the culture, right? Thai, Chinese, Malay, Japanese, Sumatran, Indian, Thai, and so on. To the third question, what are the challenges with writing these stories? Okay, the challenges of writing our stories, or if you plan to write other stories from our community. The third challenge, the challenge would be, imagine if you are excited, right? Or imagine if you are Emily Bronte, okay, Charles Dickens, writing for an English audience about English culture in an English setting. Easy, right? Of course, that's good, easier, right? Or if you're an Australian author writing for an Australian community, a little more monocultural than the complexity of Malaysia. So imagine if you're writing for from a hybrid culture, which is a Baba Nyonya culture, right? And I'm writing in English. I'm not writing in Baba Malay or Kim. I'm writing in English. How on earth do you capture all the essence, all the flavors of the Baba Nyonya people? Right? It's so complex. It's a hybrid culture of Malay, Chinese, Japanese, Thai, Indian, Portuguese, Dutch, British, and so on. So that is a real challenge, to be able to carry out the flavors. You can't say, oh, let's have tea, let's have cucumber sandwiches. Ooh, jolly good, can I have it over? You can't, like, you say, hey, silakan, why you tak makan ini? Boleh habis sepak di muka. So how do you do that in English, writing in English? So you have to put in some words, some local words for flavors, to get the flavor across. You don't want to like bore your whole audience with a glossary and index and quotation marks and so on. So that's one challenge. The other challenge is, I'm sure you're all quite aware of this, there are many things in our culture, in all our different cultures, that do not have an equivalent in English. For example, it's so manja, washi, means so lovey-dovey, but not quite lovey-dovey. Or your baby so cute, so geram, peach's cheek. Is there any equivalent for geram? Any equivalent at all? There isn't, right? So geram, it's so cute, but it's not quite cute. Or balata. If you travel the entire China, entire country of China, you won't come across any Chinese woman who will go into balata. They won't like. It's very much a Nusantara Southeast Asian thing. Maybe for the Malays, maybe for the Japanese. We Nyonyas, the biggest, maybe not as much. We just go cranky, oh my god, nowadays. But the earlier generations, for example, my grandma, she kind of things, very body kind of people. They would just break into some kind of a sweat. Sometimes they even do in poetry, sometimes even get up and put a little dance. Very, very interesting. People have actually done a PhD research on such a topic, on balata. So there are also cultural concepts in our cultures that do not have an English equivalent. Balata, kena ciong, which happened to my grandmother. She was pregnant with a third daughter, the third child, and one night she was startled by this chetia who came knocking on the door. When she gave birth to the baby was very, very dark. Again, there was no English word. It's not bespoke, it's not bewitched, it's not text, it's not charm, it's kenachong. So there's no word. So that's the fascinating thing about writing in about the stories. And the third challenge was there was no precedent, no fiction apart from only two novels by Chin Ki-on and wrote on, let's see, Chin Ki-on, Pilot the Nyonyas, and Yo Ju Kim of Coal, Powder and Rouge, 1984 and 1992. So when I wrote my trilogy of short stories, there was no precedent of short stories at all. We had to just start on fresh ground. Okay, and what's the last question? Oh, would you consider writing about the Peranakan history? Will you consider writing stories based on Peranakan history in the face of so much distortion and commodification of our heritage culture? Yes, you see a lot of commodification. The thing was, this Baba Nyonya culture is so complex, but it either dies up or it becomes very well known, or it becomes globally known, and then once it becomes that way, there's money to be made, commodification starts to be done. So some of us national TV, we see some things going wrong. For example, in the past, no Nyonya in the right mind would go walking around the town in the heat, carrying a funny little umbrella and fanning herself with a colorful fan. You know, your grandmother's lucky you do that because you don't go around walking in the street. But nowadays you see Chinese tourists wearing the sankabaya wrongly. I've seen Chinese tourists wearing this slit right in the center and exposing their thighs at home. So while commodification has set in, I feel that people who are in the business should have some kind of sense of responsibility, like make sure it's properly transferred. So for me, when you write fiction, you don't write out to moralize, you don't write out to preach, you just write from your heart. Right? You just want to capture the zikas, the flavor, the essence of your culture, and you can do that in fiction. In non-fiction, you have to be very careful. You cannot simply just read long plays. But in fiction, you can. You can kill off the character, you can play God with characters. So the thing about that last question is, yes, you can do that through fiction to convey the flavors, the essence of your Nyonya culture. Thank you.
Now over to Julie.
Okay. Sorry, one more addendum to that. One more. I have, keeping up with what I mentioned just now, historical fiction, I have, for the past 4 years, been working on a novel. So it's historical fiction, it's based in history, it's based on something that everyone here, everybody's grandmother or mother has experienced, and that is the Japanese occupation of Malaya. It's a very, very tough topic. I interviewed 10 persons, apart from my mother and uncles, 5 octogenarians, 1 nonagenarian, and 1 centenarian. For the experiences living through World War II, the memories, the long-term memory is amazing. Like, you can't remember what's your name, but you can remember what happened in World War II. So based on interviews and 4 long years of writing, thank you so much to Stephen for all the support. It has been completed, and I've managed to get, the publisher is very interested in it, and I've signed the agreement. It should be out by next year, latest in August. Watch out for Run, My Daughter's Run, based on how the women, the young women during World War II had to run to hide, tie cloth around their breasts, cut their hair, just composed in a state of running away from the Japanese who came around looking for comfort. Okay? Thank you.
Well, I remember all these stories my mom told me, Japanese occupation, how they had even a secret partition that the women will hide soldiers coming, so all the ladies, young girls would be behind the secret partition, things like that. So I remember those. I was born after the war, just after the war.